Welcome to B2B Commerce Corner. Commerce Corner is a sub-series of the E-commerce Edge podcast discussing all things B2B commerce through the lens of agencies, consultants, merchants, and more. Enjoy. Welcome to another episode of the pod. I have an amazing next guest to introduce to you today, Mr. Baptiste Cumin, and he is the CEO of Rastro AI. Welcome to the pod, Baptiste.
Great to be here.
It was so cool to meet you at B2B Online, and it was so cool to have the chat. And we took over a hidden away bar in town that you had to have a secret knock or some sort of secret entry to get into this thing. And it was cool. It was awesome to meet you, to hang out with you, to have a couple of drinks under our belt and talk about life and the fact that you're getting married very soon. And you got a lot of stuff going on in your personal life and your professional life. And I was like, man, you reached out on LinkedIn and you said, look, how do we go about doing this? Or how do we go about doing that? And I said, look, why don't you just come on the pod? Let's have a chat. You get to exercise this muscle because you're going to need it. You're going to need it as the leader of a company. You're going to need to exercise that muscle of getting out and being visible and being founder led. And I just think it's an important skill. And I was like, not only will that be good for you, but it'll be good for me and my audience because they get to learn about an amazing new piece of technology hitting the industry. And so it's a win-win-win all the way around, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think one thing that's been interesting, we came from the B2C world and transitioning to B2B, it's so relationship led, and how quickly people are ready to mentor and take on like new entrants into the field is something I found really exceptional. And the other thing I'll say is coming from an engineering background, this muscle of getting out there and saying the thing loud, this is not natural. And it's a muscle, we're working on it. And it's a fixed society and excited to get into it.
My pleasure. And I did tell you off air, I said, look, I think sometimes engineers, or people of a technical background or bent, they sell themselves short of in terms of being able to do this and being able to have conversations and being able to be sociable and being able to tell the founder story and have a narrative around their product or platform. And I've seen some of the best technical people in the world, especially tech leads in dev teams, I'll occasionally have to, when I was back in my days of building agencies, have to sit them down in front of customer, hold their hand as we have those conversations directly with customers. But sometimes people oftentimes really appreciate being able to have those direct conversations with someone technical without needing into intermediary or an account manager or a project manager sitting in between. They're like, God, just let me talk to the bloody developer. Just let me explain what the issue is. Just let me explain directly what we're trying to achieve without an interpreter in between, and we'll get things done a hell of a lot faster. And so I think that technical people, and like most of my developers that I've ever worked with, they're like, oh, hell no, do not put me in front of the customer. But the ones that do, and they get outside their comfort zone, they oftentimes end up liking it more than they think they're going to like it. And they suddenly get the connection between what they're building and who they're developing it for and the motivation behind it. And all of a sudden now the puzzle pieces start to click together, and they get more fulfillment out of what they're doing. They enjoy it more instead of it being a black box of why are we even building this damn thing to begin with. Now they understand it, and it allows them to build a little bit of empathy for the people and companies that they're building for. And I think that's a really important connection that we need to try to facilitate.
Yeah, no, totally. And that's what's nice when we're running the booths, talking to our customers. There's no like, all right, let's bring the nerd in. Let's bring the solutions in. Like he's right in front of you. The quant is right here. And so What's exciting as well is sometimes you're in these conversations with Fortune 500 companies, and they're trying to look at what's on the horizon. And there's no link here. Like I can tell you, I was demoing something actually when we met at B2B Atlanta. I met someone and I was showing him a model that came out in October. It is a browser use model, which I think is very applicable to the distributor space. And I was telling him, hey, look, this is from 2 weeks ago. And there's no way you could get this from, salespeople are so busy, it's very hard for them to keep up with the industry news, right?
Yes.
And you're getting it from the source, you're hearing it from the baker himself. So I think that's the strength.
I love
and
that.
Now,
I love that. I love that. And before you started Rastro, you were a long time Shopify alum, over 6 years at Shopify. And is that where you developed your passion and love for commerce?
Yes, actually, I've always been. So I was an economics major before. So I was not new. I came into this because I was into econometrics. I was actually into modeling the economy. And the moment it clicked for me is I did this case study with the Bank of Canada, and we had to set their interest rates. We went to Ottawa and we met the governors of the Bank of Canada. And the moment I became disillusioned with economics and I switched into development was when I realized we'd spent building all of these models of the economy. And the second we had to present to real bankers, it was just look at a couple graphs and take a swing finger. And so I was like, okay, what are we learning all this for? So I got much closer to econometrics and hardcore statistics, machine learning, etc. And I joined this company, which was already a big company. We were 2,000 at the time, Shopify in 2017. I joined them because they were the best developers in where I was, which is in Montreal. And by the time I left 6.5 years later, it was a very different place. Like I didn't have to explain to my parents what I did anymore. People just knew what I worked on. And you grow with the company you're in. So I came in, my first task was to build the recommendation algorithm for 1 million storefronts.
Wow.
So we were having to build, and Shopify is able at pushing responsibility to developers. And I had great mentors, but they would first task on my desk, day one is, look, we need you to build a recommendation algorithm that's going to work for Fashion Nova, Kylie Jenner, and a mom and pop shop that just launched 6 months ago. And it was a lot of all-nighters, and I actually brought down the Shopify training cluster at one point. So a little bit of learning and an angry message at 1 a.m. on a Friday night is, I won't make this mistake again. I learned, but it was honestly the best boot camp I could hope for. And you could tell this company is led by a developer and really sweats the details and cares. So it was a fortunate choice. I've been tied to commerce even before that, but it definitely launched my career and then launched what I do today.
And why Rastro? Why this problem? Why this challenge specifically? Because if I look out the pantheon of commerce enablement technologies, and anything that's not a pure e-commerce platform, I can put in the bucket of commerce enablement technologies, which is what I would consider Rastro. We've had a few sort of what I would, on the surface now, admittedly and transparently, we've never done a project together. I've never used your platform, but I have to go with what's on the tin, so to speak, on the website. But if I was to look at that and I was to bucketize it into enrichment automation, for lack of a better term, product data enrichment automation, there's a number of platforms out there that are launched in the last couple of years. There's been some that have been in market for a long time. There's a couple from Australia. There's a couple from the US. It's not like you've entered into a category of one, right? You've entered into a category that's pretty hot. It's pretty demanding because people need to do more with less now than ever before, particularly in the B2B world. And then there's companies like DataX that do some part of manual work, and then they do some machine learning based work, some AI based work, but a lot of it is manual as well. So there's a number of different solutions in the market that I would broadly put into the same bucket as you. And when you looked out there, what was it about the existing solutions in the market that you went, nah, I think we could do this better?
Yeah. So I think first you got to start from the team, right?
Yep.
And I think we are the only team in the market that brings a combination of this deep e-commerce experience, because we know e-commerce is a very different beast, and this deep AI expertise, having actually worked as a staff AI engineer for 7 years. And this technology is moving very quickly. And what I was saying earlier, if there's a new model that came out in October, I was looking at what was in the market and I just felt like it was a year behind capabilities. And even today, if you look at what's possible in terms of structuring really complicated data and turning that into products, which is more of what we do, and even broader look at the PIM landscape, which I'm sure is something you'll talk about, it still feels like the very early innings. Like you have to take a broader view on this. If I 2004 and it became huge in 2015, really? This is commerce is exceptionally complicated, and which is why a lot of these companies don't come out of Silicon Valley, by the way. And what I noticed in the market is just that, to be honest, it's just a feeling that the quality is not quite there and we're still a little bit behind. And in this fast moving market, I looked out, what is this going to look like in 5 years? And I saw the PIM broadly in sort of catalog operations taking a center stage and becoming a nerve center for modern e-commerce businesses. And so that's what drives me. And all this also didn't come from high above. It came from my time also working at Shopify, working on their marketplace, the shop marketplace, standardizing their catalog of literally 2 billion SKUs and trying to sell everything from from, like I said, Kylie Jenner's lipstick to your mom and pop shop and standardizing that.
Tractors.
Yeah, to
And everything in
tractors, to
between.
tractors. And when we zoom out and we look at this, like all that to say, like in the market right now, we're still in the very early innings. The field is wide open, and I think the problem is very much unsolved.
And it's interesting also, I think you are the only platform operating in your particular category that would say that they focus on B2B, but more importantly, distribution, B2B distribution, because a lot of these competing platforms, they've started in the retail world. And in
Mm,
some instances, they specialize in only one vertical of the retail world. So you take a platform like Ocular, for example, which came out of Australia, and it's been operating for, I think they've been around for 5 or 6 years now, and they specialize in just fashion retail and completely automating the attribution of products and getting them catalog ready, but specifically for fashion retail, and being able to take a photo of an item, a black and white polka dot dress, and being able to convert that into a whole series of structured and unstructured data that can be plumbed directly into your commerce platform or your PIM system. And so we have a lot of vertical specific or category specific platforms. We also have a lot of platforms that are more broadly applied to retail, because obviously it's a very different challenge to solve if you're trying to create an attribute set for a coffee mug. It's a
mhm.
very different proposition than if you're trying to do that for an industrial pump.
Yeah.
It's such a different, it's just everything about that is challenging, right? When you move particularly into like industrial distribution, say for example, where you've got two belts, for example, that for all intents and purposes look identical, but they have completely different specifications to them, for example. And in that world, just looking at a photo of two belts side by side isn't going to get it done. It doesn't allow you to extrapolate sufficient product data from that to create a good user experience on the front end. And so it feels like you've gone after the more challenging side and spectrum of the industry than maybe the simpler, more retail focused side.
The truth is, on the retail side, this is not as big of a differentiator, right?
Yes.
As when you're selling technical equipment, your product data is really the lifeblood of what you're guaranteeing to your customers. Sunco, one of our customers, they sell light bulbs. If they get the wattage, the manuals, the specifications wrong, that's an electrician that is with a customer and all of a sudden has to reorder. This is life or death for these customers and their businesses. Whereas if you're selling fashion, I think a lot of it is emotional.
Yes.
And when you're looking at product data, this is not the place to start. So that's why for us, we started in distribution, and it's the importance of specs and how high the bar is, which is why we wanted to start there, because we think we can deliver something, a 10x improvement on how we do specifications today. And two, the volume of products you're dealing with. I mean, some of these companies, it's millions and millions of products, and a lot of these being filled out manually today. So you've got entire teams that are churning this out, and it's not the most meaningful work day to day. So for us, we're thinking of where we bring value. It's the logical place to start.
And I think if you are solving, the bigger the problem you are trying to solve, the bigger the moat you create by definition, and the stickier you become to the clients that you end up working with, right? So if
Mm,
you're one of those automatic enrichment platforms that works primarily with a retail focus, what's interesting is that there's a fusion, just like there was a fusion starting 5 to 10 years ago in the retail landscape. There was a massive M&A activity and amalgamation of search, merch, and personalization platforms. You look at
hmm
somebody like Anasto, who was originally just a pure personalization platform. Then they realized, shit, we need all the data from enterprise search. So now we need to acquire a search company. We need to put these all together. Then we need to be able to do really deep and detailed merchandising on the front end. All the way, instead of just having a product rec panel, now we actually want to take over the navigation structure, and we want to personalize that for every single customer. And we
hmm
want to, there's 1,000 things we want to personalize here other than just putting a product recommendation panel on a PLP, PDP, and a cart page. So I feel like this industry that you're in is going through somewhat of a similar crucible moment where the PEM platform vendors, for example, particularly the ones that are focused on retail, are going, geez, these pre-enrichment platforms are really starting to eat our lunch, and they're starting to take away budget from our PIM implementations and our PIM subscriptions. So we now need to think about whether we bring this kind of capability into our platform so that they can do everything. It's a one-stop shop for
Yeah.
ingestion. So it does the full ETL capability plus all of a sudden now we can do the enrichment in our platform, the automatic enrichment in our platform, etc. And then we've got even some e-commerce platforms bringing some of that capability into the platform as well, especially the modular e-commerce platforms that have light PIM
Hmm.
capability built in. They're going, okay, cool. We can bring AI enrichment capabilities into our platform. So it feels like this is being attacked from a lot of different angles purely because it is such a ginormous problem. And
Yeah.
I think, particularly in distribution, I think it goes back to a few factors. One is if you're a distributor, you're not in control of your product data. You're getting it from the manufacturer. That's the first thing. And manufacturers are notoriously bad in the industrial space or in the distribution space of getting good product data into their distributors' hands. That's the first thing. Second of all, the importance, as you pointed out, of compliance. If I'm specifying, if I'm an engineer, I'm specifying a steel beam into a load-bearing engineering spec. I need that thing. I need that data to be right because people could die if it's wrong. So I
Yeah.
think from a compliance perspective, from a safety perspective, there's so many areas where this can go badly wrong that if you don't get it right in distribution, the consequences can be drastic and lead to big lawsuits. And then the final
Yeah.
thing I will say, and I'd love your take on this, is that in distribution, million plus SKU catalogs are completely normal. If you've got a
Yeah.
50,000 SKU catalog as a retailer, that's a big damn catalog. In distribution, that's like the smallest catalog you'll ever find. And so I think the scale of the problem in distribution and the impact of the problem on distribution is wild. And that's how I see it. What is your take?
Yeah, and I think what you're saying is exactly right. So you have this enormous catalog, right? And at the same time, there's pressure on margins. And we have all of this operational capacity within distributors that's going into essentially formatting data to launch all of these new products at the million plus SKU scale. And if I zoom out here and I look at the PIM sort of industry and what I see happening, it's two things, which is one, we are going from a world where you needed to structure all of your data to come into the PIM before you got started with the PIM project, to a world where you can do what I call just-in-time structuring. So just-in-time manufacturing, right? Before you would hold all this inventory, hoping the demand would show up. Just-in-time manufacturing, as soon as a demand shows up, you just pop out a car and you sell it, and you avoid this baggage of the inventory. I think with structuring your data for products, there's something similar here, which is that you're able to pull in all of this messy data now, like everything the manufacturer is running you, the 100-page catalogs, the XLSX files, like you guys all know what I'm talking about, right? So you're able to pull all this in, and at the last possible moment, you can just structure as you need and push it out. We literally had a go live last week where 5 minutes before we were going to hand over the project, they said, "Hey, we want to change all the spec bullets. Can you do this?" And this was not a problem. Like I said, yes, change the prompt, 1,000 products reformatted in 5 minutes, right? So this, what just-in-time structuring, what it actually does is it means you can store a lot more data in the PIM than you used to be able to, because the PIM is able to reason over more complicated documents than previously. So I think this is a structural shift, almost like data warehousing and NoSQL. If you remember those days before, we had databases at first, everything has to be a table. Now
Yep.
nothing has to be a table. Like we can pull in those PDFs, and we can just reason over that. That's what we're doing already for our existing customers. And at distribution, like you said, when the manufacturers are sending you horrible data, that's very interesting to them. That's something we're already doing for current customers. I'll say briefly, the other shift I'm seeing here is PIMs are going from places where you do the work. So you have many people coming in, writing the description, uploading an image, the design team coming in and uploading an image, to pieces of software that actually do the work for you. So
Yes.
they're becoming content production machines, right?
Yes.
We are writing copy. So text is the first thing. And I think this is now a commodity. Everyone does this. Like I can write your descriptions. But I think people aren't quite seeing the big picture here, which it starts there, but we're already helping customers create spec sheets as well. We're helping customers remove the background and standardize their imagery. We've started here, and our really strong sort of backbone is in this messy data and adding some structure to it. But where I see the PIM going is something that can take all this messy data and then produce the content that you need on demand when you need it. Right, going back to our early answer, I still think we're in the very early innings here.
And it's interesting that you say that because I've been having a lot of industry conversations with a lot of people about where we all collectively think PIM is ultimately headed. And I think these conversations have been shaped by the very real and recent advent of multimodal AI. And I'll
Mm.
explain to you what I mean by that. For the people that are listening who haven't maybe either heard that term before or don't understand what its practical reality is, it means that I obviously, with ChatGPT, for example, I can upload a PDF, I can upload a CSV, I can upload an image. Doesn't really matter what the format of data is I upload to it. And I can get meaningful answers and extrapolations back from that content. I've used this example on the podcast before, but I'll just mention it again. I was buying a dirt bike about 6 months ago, and a lot of the listings on Facebook Marketplace had images, and they might have even had the make and the model, but they didn't have the year, for example. And so I would just download the image from Facebook Marketplace. I'd upload it to ChatGPT, and I'd say, "Tell me everything you know about this image." Oh, it looks like it's this year, it's this make, it's this model, it's got this aftermarket bit on it. Oh, and by the way, those forks are from this model year, so it looks like it's this and this based on the image. And I was blown away. I was blown away by the quality of the answers that I was getting from ChatGPT. And it's the same with a PDF. I remember a world not that long ago where if I wanted to get information out of a PDF, I'd open it up in Acrobat, I'd do a control F for a keyword, I'd find the keyword in the PDF document, and then I'd go to that page and I'd copy and paste any piece of relevant information out I needed, and then I'd be able to reference that page of the PDF. Now I can upload a PDF, a 150-page PDF to ChatGPT, and I can say, find this everything about this topic in this PDF and then reference it and tell me what page it's on. And boom, in 5 seconds, boom, it's all done for me. So it's this multimodality of AI that is completely transforming the way we interact with data. And in your world and in our world that we work in with distribution, I have wondered for a while because of this multimodality. I've wondered when we move away from needing our PIM data to be ultra structured on the way in and the way out to where are we eventually going to get to a world where we just dump a whole crap load of data of all sorts of different types into an S3 bucket? We have a query engine that gets turned into a vector data store, and then we can
Yeah.
query it in real time for any information we need, and it can extrapolate meaningful information out of that data no matter where it is, and it doesn't need to be structured at all. And I feel like we're not quite there yet, but I feel also like we might not be that far away either.
Yeah, this is, you're speaking my language, Jay. I think you're exactly right. I will say structuring is still very helpful. Like we still have NoSQL and databases and DevLand, of
Yes,
course. And I think where
yes.
we'll get to is like you ingest everything. It's just like you pull everything into your data warehouse, right? You've got unstructured data, you've got structured data, very similar. And then this is our bread and butter. Like we are reading in PDFs, we're reading in messy Excel files. We are enriching them all with content that we're finding online about these vendor products. So we pull all that in, and it's a huge mess if a human had to go through this themselves. And then we can turn this, we can do the exact structure you need just in time. And I think the interesting shift is what you're saying is there's multimodality. What's the next step? And I think once you understand that the AI is able to understand anything you throw at it, this is when you start actually 10xing the amount of data you put into your PIM. And it becomes a real nerve center for the business. So this is eventually what we're betting on. Look, we're younger and we're focused on solving this narrow problem of launching vendor products faster by enriching and cleaning them up. But if I look forward, I think a PIM is going to have a much role in businesses than it does today.
And I think the key challenge that you solve is speed, right? So I was working about a year ago, I was working with an industrial products distributor. They manufactured about 10 or 20% of their products, and then about 80% of their products they were a distributor for because they were going to market with a full package solution, not just, they wanted to sell solutions, not just
Mm.
SKUs. And so therefore they couldn't manufacture everything that they sold, but they had full engineering services, for example. And so they would go in
Mm.
and they would engineer a solution into a client's facility or location. And then they would also supply all the equipment needed to put that installation into place. And when I started working with them, I learned that any new brand that they wanted to take on and distribute their products, there was a 12-month waiting list to take on new brands into their business because of the
Wow.
time it took to get the catalog data from them, to get the base data into the ERP, to get the enriched data into their PIM system, to structure it in such a way that they could present it both online and in their digital catalogs that they were sending out via EDI and punch out. So they were in a real challenged environment where it's like, hey, we've already got 3 people on our merchandising team. We don't, if we want to cut this using our current modality, if we want to cut that down from say 12 months to 6 months, we'll need to double the size of our team, right, of
Yeah.
merchandisers to do all this stuff manually, to go to the supplier's website, scrape down information from the website, download PDFs, extract data from that, put it into nice tabular data format, cleanse it, normalize it, get it into all of our systems, price it. Like all those steps were so involved and were so human mediated that it was just, it felt like a never, it felt like there was never a time when they would ever be able to catch up with how
Yeah.
many products they needed to onboard.
This is a common story we hear. And what I hope here is that there's a second order effect. If we bring this down from 12 months, by the 12 months is what's difficult about here if they're being honest, right? If you meet them
Yeah.
at a conference, yeah,
Yeah.
they'll tell you it's a month, and then you talk to the team and it's actually there's always the third round of reviews, right? And if
Yes.
we can
Yes.
take that 12 months and we can bring it down to 2 weeks, and there's still human review, like lie to ourselves. You still want
Yes.
humans to look at the data, you want good quality control. But if we bring that down to 2 weeks, we think of ourselves as backlog killers. Like every distributor has this backlog of all of these vendors they could add to their platform. And for distribution, of course, it's all about landing that long tail. It's not just about revenue you're bringing in incrementally. It's about landing those bigger deals and becoming that one-stop shop for your bigger customers. And what does that mean operationally for you? It's not just that your catalog doubles. It's what are those deals that you use, those incremental deals that you can now go after. So this is, this is the sort of long-term vision, what we're going after. And to your point, it's not just like a clean up the data. There's many steps in this process of listing a vendor product. You're going to need to price it. We're building out the pricing module and getting pricing benchmarks from publicly available data. You're going to need to clean it up. You're going to need to merchandise it. We do all of that. And then you need to make sure the images are great. They're probably sending you a blurry, uncentered PDF screenshot, something from a USB key. So how do we clean that up? We've got a whole photo studio. It's a really complicated, multifaceted problem. Something that I'm pretty comfortable working on for a while. I think will take some time, but I really think for our customers today, we're making a real dent for them, and that's our goal.
And do you think that what you are doing now would have been possible in a pre-mainstreaming of AI period of time? Or do you believe that this AI revolution, and I know that I got friends in the industry that have been working in AI for over a decade, right? And so they're going, I don't know what this big deal about AI is. We've been doing this for a hell of a long time. Like vector stores have been around for a long time. And so for them, they're like, I don't get why this is now such a big deal to the minds of your average pedestrian human on the street, so to speak. But I think what platforms like ChatGPT and Grok and Gemini now and Perplexity and all the others, I think what they've done is they have turned something that used to be only really available and used to the most technical of humans on the planet, and they've turned it into a retail product experience. And I think if nothing else, that has opened up an opportunity for them to bring in revenue from not just the high-tech dev community, but now they can go after every consumer of technology on the planet. And I feel like, if nothing else, like for example, you personally might have been able to do a lot of this stuff with custom algorithms and custom machine learning algorithms years ago. But I feel like the fact that every major tech company on the planet, and certainly the tier one LLM developers, I feel like that has made it not only more accessible to the common man in the street, woman in the street, but also to people developing products on top of those technologies too, what you're doing.
Yeah, I think you're so right. You know what? Other example, I was working on Shops Marketplace, and I built a new algorithm for our search. This was 5 years ago. And the A/B test results come in, and they're fantastic. It's like the best result we've ever gotten. And we go, and then the complaints come in from customers, and it's the most complaints we've ever gotten. And we realized that the algorithm was recommending, let's say, salacious products to customers,
Oh, yes.
and it was doing that to juice its engagement metrics.
Of course.
And as a part of this, I had to build a salacious classifier. Okay, and this was a project of mine, and it took 3 months and it was 3 months, by the way, agonizing. I was in a co-working space and I was having these meetings with just products all over my screen, having to classify what's allowed, what's borderline, and what's very not allowed. It's 3 months, and today I put this into for this at ChatGPT, and I could get this project out in a day. So
Yes.
to your point, I think this is exactly like when you bring down I think people sometimes think of it so operationally. Oh,
Yes.
I'll bring down like how long it takes me to launch vendor products, and then I'll save some money on the people that used to be doing that won't be doing that. But I think you have to think of a second order effect sometimes. Like, where does that take your business if your catalog is now 10 times bigger, for example?
Yes.
And so, and it's exactly what you said, is that actually AI really, a lot of the stuff that we're implementing today could have been done with algorithm 5 years ago, just with 6 months in a dev team. And
Yes.
so what we're seeing now is the side effects of this enormous democratization. But we're also seeing, I think, a huge culture shift. I've been so impressed going to these B2B conferences, talking to, I'm going to show my age here, but 60-year-old guys who've been in the industry for 40 years and like really know their stuff. And they will be talking to me about ChatGPT and tool calling and depth of
I
knowledge.
resemble that comment, unfortunately. I'm not quite 60 yet. I've just turned 51, so I'm not quite 60 yet. But to your point, 5 years ago, I was not thinking about AI. It was not on my radar. It was not a little bit of machine learning with developers that obviously I'm friends with, etc. But like hardcore daily application of AI was not on my radar at all. And now I live in it every single day. And like
Yeah.
to your point, that democratization has allowed even old dudes like me to have almost a new lease on life in terms of being really invigorated and excited. I've always been excited about our industry, but certainly, like since the arrival of mobile, this is the next most exciting technological shift I've seen in my career.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And it's a democratic technology, which I think this is not true of all technologies. Like rocket travel, like SpaceX is doing cool stuff. I'm not touching satellites. This doesn't. But this, you have the same access as I do to this technology, to ChatGPT, and you can figure out what's useful for your business. So I think that's it's been the most broad-based technological shift, and the fastest one maybe ever, even more than internet. Like the internet started with a bunch of PhDs in a lab, like started with Chat. This has had 100 million users within 30 days. So,
Yeah.
I think that's like something that's very unique to this current wave of technological change. And it's touched everyone, even in the distribution industry, who probably is sick of talking about AI right now, but already know their stuff. And so that's, I think, helped get a lot of projects off the ground.
And it's so cool because the likes of, I don't know if you've heard of a quite well-known guy in distribution, but more the tech side, Nick Pericles. I don't know if you've heard of him. I call him the Mr. AI of distribution.
Not
Anyway,
yet.
I'll make an intro for you. I've had him on the pod. Go listen to the pod that I did with him. Awesome guy, super cool guy. I've been working in space for a very long time, but now he is evangelizing specifically. He's working with distributors to figure out all the ways they can integrate AI into their internal workflows and to make themselves more efficient, even just using standard off-the-shelf tool sets like ChatGPT, like Perplexity, etc. Nothing custom built, just how can we start practically integrating AI into existing internal workflows in your business to make the business more efficient over time. And he's seeing great success. And 2 weeks prior to B2B Online Atlanta, I was in Scottsdale at B2B e-commerce world, and he did 2 sessions. He ran 2 sessions there, and they were the most popular sessions of the whole weekend that we were there. And it was because he literally got up there and he didn't have these polished, pre-planned demos. He was literally doing things that a distributor would normally do, but he was pulling up ChatGPT. He was running the queries in real time. He was uploading the files in real time. He was getting outputs in real time. He was literally almost putting on a master class of how can you use these tools today, not pie in the sky, hyper practical, $20 a month subscription to ChatGPT,
Yeah.
and you can get a heck of a lot of use out of this today, right now. This is not
Yeah.
dream time. This is not $1 million POC. This is right now, today, you can start using these tools in your business. And I tell you, people were just, their jaw was hanging open. I was looking around the room, and a lot of sessions at conferences, people are looking at their phone or they're looking at their laptop and they're half watching the speaker, half looking at their phone. Everybody's eyes were glued on the screen because in real time, he was doing things that were practical for people to apply in their business. And I think that democratization of AI has allowed that to be possible.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. And even though in the early innings of AI, we weren't even sure, is this going to be something where you replace people, right? Now it feels, but that was what we were discussing at the
That was the
time.
worry.
That was the worry. And actually these days, I think we've all come to realize, no, this is a force multiplier. And
Yes.
the best people, take a sales rep now, they can pull quotes, they can price like in half the time it would take them. It's a good example of you still need a great sales rep, but
Yes.
all the admin that you were paying them for is off the table, and now they can focus on what they do really well. And this is even something we see this, of course, we help people do content production, right? For vendor onboarding. We actually need we're not coming in as this product that you drop that you don't configure and you let it run. It's crazy. You need to configure the prompts and set the quality bar and even review the outputs and improve the prompts to get the right results. And what we're seeing is some of the employees that are most clued in to these tools day to day, like for their even personal use, we're using ChatGPT to plan their holidays. They're the ones that are most comfortable doing this stuff. So it's really like the sort of consumer AI and like how you're using it and your attitude to it in your own life, and then how you use it at work, like kind of intermingle and give you this clear help you even use the sort of professional tools better, I think, to your point. And so yeah, I don't know, I totally agree with you. It's a positive cultural shift, I think.
Yeah, and look, I think you're too young to remember this because you're way younger than me. But I remember the days when, because when I was hiring people, for example, to work in agencies or to work in the businesses that I was in at the time, this is back in the very early days of the internet. I remember people would apply, and on their CV, they would put expert Googler as one of their bullet points
Oh yeah.
of capabilities, right? That sounds ridiculous. Like we laugh about that
Yeah.
now, but at the
Yeah.
time, getting great results out of Google, you needed to know how to refine your prompts, queries, how to refine your queries. You had to know how to use these because obviously we had a lot of indexes on the internet that were cross-linking, and
Oh
you
yeah.
had specific indexes of sites for specific topics or areas of specialization, and so you really needed to know how to use Google well to get great results out of Google. Now, most people today, they can't even remember back that far when Google wasn't like all knowing about all things at all times. Like they just can't remember a time when you needed to be able to be really good at using the technology to get the best out of it,
Yeah.
because now it's so good that it can almost freaking read your mind, right? And I think the same thing about really good prompt engineers today or prompt specialists, right? Like I consider myself a pretty damn good prompt specialist now, only because I used an app that plugged into my Brave browser about a year ago, where it redirected all my Omnibox queries to ChatGPT automatically. And I went cold turkey. I went from one day using Google for all my queries to the next day ChatGPT for all my queries. And I was like, if I don't go cold turkey at some point, I will never learn this stuff. I will never be
Yeah.
forced to figure this out unless I just make the wholesale move. Because going back to what's comfortable is always the easiest path, right? But it's
Yeah.
damn, if I really want to learn this AI stuff, I got to go all in on it. And I feel like when you see CVs today that say expert prompt engineer, right? I think eventually that's going to be as ridiculous to put on a CV as it would be now to put expert Googler. And I think that's what the democratization has created.
That's a good point. And I'll say briefly, I am old enough to have had a librarian do a Googling session with me to teach us how to Google. And I still remember it to this day because it's something that I look back, same as you, and I'm like, well, this is insane. You don't see where it's going. And I think on AI, the sort of prompting, like the particularities of how models interpret, my friend will get hurt if you do this wrong, stuff like that. Like,
Yes.
of course, that's going to go out the window. I have friends at Anthropic working on that. But what I've seen shift is context engineering. And I think for
Yes.
businesses, this is really an important shift. It's about how do you put all context of your business and feed it through to these AIs? And I think it brings us back to an earlier point on pins becoming a nerve center and pulling in all of the nitty gritty, all of the dirty, under the table, under the carpet parts of your business, the manufacturing docs, etc., so that the AI can have the context to do the job properly. And so designing a great sort of AI product is almost like designing a great onboarding system. Sometimes how I think about it, like it's like we're building you this agent to onboard to add these vendor products, and it's like we're onboarding a new team member. And how do we give them all the information they need to do their job properly? So this from prompt engineering to context engineering, I think is the context engineering is not going to go anywhere, but the prompt engineering probably just to sign our times.
And I'll give you a really practical area where I think this is going to have such a dramatic impact on the commerce experience. And I'll give it even through the lens of a retail consumer first. But I'd love to get your take on this. I remember a few years ago, this is long before AI went mainstream. This is even before I left New Zealand. I So this is probably circa 2020-ish, 2021-ish, somewhere around there. And So I bought a wrecked. So I'm really into motorcycles, and so I bought a wrecked street bike, and I was basically going to rebuild it, and I got it for a really cheap
Cool.
price. And I started jumping online because I needed some OEM, some parts I could get aftermarket, but some I needed the genuine OEM parts
Yeah.
to fix certain parts. Now, the challenge is that even through the retailers that sell parts, OEM like the dealers, they they have these spec sheets and these exploded diagrams and exploded drawings that even when they make those available, they have a zoom function and you got to look at it and then you got to zoom in and you got to go, I think that's the part that I need. And then it's got a little arrow that points to it with a little part number off to the side of it. And because they don't ever use the names that you would think they would use for parts, they're like some sort of hyper technical name for this particular SKU. You're going, I think that's the part I need. And sometimes it's a little blurry and you're going, do I need the whole assembly or do I just need that little tiny little component of it? And it was hard because sometimes 99% of the parts I had to order from overseas. So I had to wait until they arrived before I realized whether it was the right part, the wrong part, or whether I got the whole part, or whether I got just part of the part. And so there was this back and forth over a period of about 6 months where I had to jump online to these parts suppliers and dealers and go into these little tiny little exploded drawings to get my parts. Now I eventually got the
Yeah.
parts, but it took forever and it was super painful. And it's
Yeah.
because that data is not human friendly. It's machine friendly, but it is not freaking human friendly. So I foresee a world where I can describe something using human language and it will be able to point me in the right direction without having to zoom in on an exploded diagram of something and hope that I get it right. Where I can literally describe, I need this component, I need this component, I need the inner sleeve. I can use totally normal human language and it will come back with a parts list for me. You need these 23 SKUs is what you need. And here I've added them to the cart for you in a
Yeah.
conversational style, like I was speaking to somebody in the parts department and describing it to them. And they're going, no, I know exactly what you need, brother. I'm going to hook you up. And this is when we start talking about agentic AI and agentic commerce, that's all fine and good. And that's all pie in the sky stuff. But this is the most practical part of agentic commerce that I can think of.
Yeah, when I started Rastro, I initially thought that conversational commerce was going to be the big thing. And I eventually realized that a lot of commerce is emotional, it's relationship based. And I think this is very overhyped, if I'm honest with you.
Yes.
And I even say this to VCs, and sometimes they don't like my answer, to be honest. But I think for very technical purchases like what you're describing, this is definitely there's a good use case, makes perfect sense. And there's even the sort of EDI,
Yes.
B2B transaction world where I think there's some changes happening there. It's very interesting.
Mhm.
But I also think about this, you're thinking about this on the demand side, like as a consumer, how do I crunch all this information? It's a nightmare. I spend my days thinking about the supply side, which is,
Yes.
hey, as a distributor, why are you putting out products with blurry images, like lacking specs? And the reason is it's manual, you've got a million products and you've got better things to do. And
Yes.
so you probably leave a lot of money on the table. It's funny you bring example, we're working with a distributor of Honda motorcycle spare parts. And they're us to, so they import the CSV of very messy, horrible Honda spare part data. And then we actually look up the part online and enrich it with the perfect spec sheets that we can find from the vendor itself. You can imagine, I mean, before this, the way they would literally Google
Yes.
each part.
Yes.
This was a 5-hour marathon session they would go on. The quality, of course, drops. So I think I'm very optimistic about this problem getting solved, like both on the demand side, let's make this easier to crunch some complicated purchasing decision, and on the supply side. Let's clean it up, people. Like you would never list this in a store. Why are you putting this on your website? You'd be
Yes.
embarrassed to have a spec sheet this blurry on your aisle. So yeah, that's hopefully give us 3.
I love it. I love it. And from a functional, if you were to look out 6, 12, 18 months from now, is there anything you don't do that you say, we don't do this today, but we will do it in 6 months' time? Or is there anything your customers are asking you for today that you don't yet do that you're going, hold fire? Yep, it's in development. We're going to deliver this to you soon.
Yeah, I think the big next frontier is competitive intelligence.
Yes.
And so we're very focused right now on content production, making sure your products look great and you can input messy data and get solid content for your products. But AIs are getting very good at spying on your competition.
Oh,
If
yeah.
you're looking at these new browser use models, I think this is not, people haven't quite clocked how good they are now at navigating the internet and pulling everything your competitors are pushing out. And so if you could imagine a PIM that could pull in all of your data, all of your content, and then benchmark how good is your product page versus your customers? How does it rank? How is it priced? I think that would be an operational superpower for whoever could get there first. And this is something that we are already working with, for example, some aftermarket distributors doing sort of price benchmark. Did a case I think we published with NY Tractor Parts where we helped them list 3,000 SKUs and price benchmark them all. But I think this is the sort of next frontier that it's going to almost redefine almost what a PIM can do and change people's perceptions.
Yeah, because there's a lot of standalone tools that do that out there, like the price matching, price comparison, price flagging, checking what includes shipping, what doesn't include shipping, what's in stock, what's
Yeah.
out of stock. And there's some, but I think bringing that into the process of how we manage our product data and how we prioritize product data, that's an area where, again, that fusion of two different pieces of technology coming together under one roof, that's where we start getting some exponential value.
I should clarify one thing here. I think this is different to a lot of existing price benchmarking tools, actually, because it's point and click. Like you can send off an agent. So previously, these price benchmarking tools are building these custom scrapers to go to your
Yes.
competitors. A lot of distributors do this already, but this is very manual and very slow. And then the UI changes, and you get like data once a quarter. They get a new sale, you'll never hear about it. These are agents that you can just prompt and will go out and pull all the data from competitors like on demand. And
Yes.
and I think this is another one of these. It democratizes access from these price benchmarking tools as like once a quarter, $1,000 contracts to like anyone has access to this on demand.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And if you could change anything about our industry, let's say wholesale distribution, if you could snap your fingers and change one thing instantaneously about our industry, what would that be?
I think there's a form shift happening right now from in-house builds and ERPs to more standardized platforms like Shopify's commerce tools of the world. Of course, I won't just talk my own book here, just a few standardized sets of platforms. And I think it's taking its time. If I could snap my fingers, I would just push this over the edge, because once you're on these platforms, it's a Lego block. And start building as an industry tools that build on top of each other much faster if we're not building custom builds every time. And so I think it's an ongoing shift of the sort of standardization of the stack in B2B that I'm very excited about. And it's probably I won't change it in a day, but I'd move that 2 or 3 years, I think.
Yep, I think the 30 or 40 B2B focused e-commerce platforms out there would hope that they're going to be one of those 1, 2, 3, 4 platforms left standing. And that's part of what because I don't just consult with manufacturers and distributors, I also consult with SIs, platform vendors, investors in the B2B world. And that's the big fight at the moment. It's the fact that in the B2B world, the level of standardization that already exists in the B2C and D2C e-commerce world, it hasn't happened yet, but it's coming, and we're already starting to see M&A activity. We're starting to see runways run out and businesses go by the wayside. We started to see even consolidation in the B2B SI space, famously Zaylab acquiring Trellis and a couple of others. So we're starting to already see consolidation in the B2B world across the board, and I only see that accelerating because there's too much feature and function overlap out there and too many platforms for them all to survive. And we've already seen this happen in the B2C and D2C e-commerce world with basically Shopify and WooCommerce won that war. And if you want total control and you want to run your own servers, you're probably going to run Woo. And then if you want it to be full SaaS and you don't want to think about infrastructure at all, then you're probably going to run Shopify. And then, of course, there's some also RANs and Magento still hanging around and a few bits and pieces. But largely, when we look at the new deployment, there's a very standardized design pattern that has emerged in the B2C and D2C world. It looks a little bit like if you're a startup, you're going to run Shopify, you're going to run Klaviyo, and you're going to run QuickBooks. That's your startup stack, right? And that's one of the reasons why I got out of focusing on the retail e-commerce world, because it was frankly getting boring. And it was like, these are such standard design patterns. There's not a lot of room for an enterprise architect like me to come in and make too many over-the-top recommendations. Merchants out there, they know all the main vendors. They've already had conversations with every main vendor. They've already decided by the time they get to me which platforms they want to run. It's for me to put them together like Lego blocks and do the integration architecture and everything else, but that's boring now. But in the B2B world, there's nothing standard. And all these B2B businesses and distributors, the products they sell, their sales processes and methodologies are all different. The level of knowledge that they have, the tribal and institutional knowledge they have around their industry is wild. And so there's no two B2B businesses that are remotely alike. And I know because I've been working with them for a long time. And that's why it's held my interest for so long. So I don't think we'll get the degree of standardization in B2B, but I think there's going to be some radical consolidation, but I don't think it'll ever become cookie cutter because B2Bs are just so wildly different.
I agree. I agree. But then once we get a little bit of that consolidation, think of the sort of the innovation that unlocks under the hood when we're already integrated with top platforms. You can plug and play absolutely anything into your business, like the sort of Shopify App Store ecosystem actually working for B2B and helping those niche use cases for B2B businesses, that market being built out, something I'm pretty optimistic about, I think.
Amazing. And if people want to get a hold of you, I will drop a link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. Other than that, how do you like people to get a hold of you and talk about all things distribution, product, data, management, and enrichment?
So you can reach me at Baptiste@Rastro.ai. You can find me on LinkedIn. And we're at most of these conferences. So come up, say hi. We like to do live demo of your real products. If you'd like to take a look and just for free, just take it for a spin, pop by, and we'll show you what we can do.
Yeah, and of course, I'll drop a link to the Rastro AI website as well in the show notes so people can go there and check out and get a lot of information on your website as well. Now, as we do come down to the end of our time together, an hour has absolutely flown by. I've really enjoyed the conversation. It's been very enlightening, very educational for me, and I'm sure my audience too. But now's the point where I get to flip the script. I get to hand the microphone over to you. I get to let you ask me one question, any question you like. It can be personal or professional. Mr. Baptiste Cumin, what is your question for me today?
Oh, we already got to talk about a lot of your life story, my life story, the sort of overlapping international path.
Yes.
But I'll ask you a business question. What's the most heretical view you have compared to the rest of the industry? So something where they would burn you at the stake if you said this out loud, and maybe they already do on stage.
I think one of the things that I am starting to realize is that the more that you do not require customers to change their behavior, the higher the adoption of your technology that you get. And whilst we in the industry, and rightfully are very heavily focused on how can we get your customers to adopt your trade portal, how can we get them to adopt these digital channels that you've created for them and digital services that you've created for them, I'm learning that with multimodal AI, that's not strictly required. And I'll give you just
Hmm.
one example of this. So there are middleware technologies today that in the B2B world, we have these communication channels, email, WhatsApp, Slack, Teams, where a lot of customers will communicate with their sales reps via these communication channels and maybe even take a photo of something. They'll scribble something on a 3M note. They'll take a photo of it and then they'll send a WhatsApp message to their account manager and say, hey, can you process this order for me? It's so common in the B2B world. And so a lot of people are pushing towards how can we get those types of customers to log into the portal to place orders, to check inventory, to check price, to make quote requests, to make return requests, to do all these things that they do manually through these communication channels with their sales reps today. How can we get them to utilize the digital tools that we've built for them? And I'm taking a slightly different view of that now
Hmm.
because of multimodal AI being able to intercept those messages, being able to interpret them, being able to structure them, being able to map them directly into the commerce system as if the customer did log into the portal to do all those things. Now we can turn those communication channels into headless commerce channels. So they can actually, almost like they were on the site, like they can make a request, a query. Hey, how much of this SKU do you have in stock? Or what's the SKU for this product? Or how fast can you get it to me? Like that. The combination of multimodal AI mixed with conversational AI means that only a tiny fraction of that communication should still have to go through to a human. And
Hmm.
that's what I'm super excited about, because what it does is it automatically brings an instant level of ROI in your digital commerce investments by not forcing any behavioral change by your customers to leverage those investments. And that's one thing that I'm super excited about. And when I talk to people about this, they're like, no, you should try to get your customers to adopt your portal and have your sales
Yeah.
reps alongside the customer and placing their orders through the portal. And yes, I'm not saying don't do exercises. I'm saying that there is a cohort of customers that will never change their behavior. And we still have to be able to support them digitally and get ROI out of our investments for even those types of customers. And if I'm on a job site, if I'm a builder and I need a rush shipment of building materials, I'm not going to log in on my phone to your portal. I'm either going to ring up my account manager, or I'm going to send them a quick message and say, send me this stuff
Mhm.
because I need it on the job site by tomorrow. You're never going to change that behavior. That's never going to change.
Yeah. And I love that. I think that makes perfect. Even you look at ChatGPT as a product, the reason it worked was chat, right?
Yes.
It's this interface
Yes.
humans are familiar with. Whereas
Yes.
before I was using the GPT-3 API, which was nerds only, right? Before
Yep.
they announced the chat version. And that was what, 50,000 users? And it exploded to 100 million users. So as soon as you get the
Yes.
form factor, like try to get the form factor as close as possible to how people are working, your adoption explodes. And we see the same thing on our side. You're not going to change. These factories in China are not going to send you perfect information. Like your vendors are never going to fill out your template properly. I'm sorry. I wish this wasn't the case. So I
Yeah.
love that. I think that's perfectly sensible. Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. Listen, this has been a fabulous conversation. I super appreciate your time. Can't wait to see you at the next conference. I'm sure we're going to cross paths a lot in 2026. Wish you every success with Rastro, and I can't wait to speak to you again soon. Thank you so much for your time. Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.